Welcome to the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast. I'm your host, David, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about all things PR with Amy Laski. Amy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Amy is passionate and an award-winning business leader who thrives on identifying and acting on the opportunities in every challenge. Armed with her business education and over 20 years of integrated communications experience as a client and as a consultant, Amy flexed her entrepreneurial muscle by founding a virtual PR agency called Felicity. The Felicity Brains, Not Bricks model breaks the traditional agency mold, delivering a completely client-centric experience based on outputs, not billable hours. In her spare time, Amy is super busy. She's working out, traveling with her family, leading the girls' twin hockey league that she started, volunteering on the board of the summer camp, and she's also trying to learn guitar. Thank you for finding some time, a little bit of time to join on the podcast. How's your day going?
Yeah, so far so good. No
Awesome.
Guitar playing, unfortunately, but better at PR
Next
than
time we'll have you on with the guitar. You can play a little song or something.
yeah.
Let's talk about PR. And I guess the best place to start is, what is PR?
Sure. Yeah, we get that a lot because PR, a lot of people think PR is getting media coverage, but it's so much more than that. So it's basically understanding who your audiences are as an organization or as an individual, and then building relationships with those audiences. And those can be either direct relationships, so between your organization and those audiences, or it can be indirectly. So, who does the audience trust already? And how can we develop relationships with those trusted sources of our audiences?
Awesome. And you've been doing this for 20 years. What is it that you love about it?
What I love about it is that you have to look from the outside perspective at yourself. So I feel like, having worked in a big corporation, marketers especially can have a tendency to kind of navel gaze. So here's what I would think as a consumer, or here's what I would think if I was a doctor or a donor. And I think for PR, you first and foremost have to start with what's important to my audience and what's going on in their world, so that I, as a brand champion, can make myself relevant to their lives and make myself useful. So I think it's really kind of taking that perspective. And a lot of times it requires creativity and the relationship building aspect. It's really about understanding how you can kind of make a win-win-win in any given situation.
100%. Being able to, as a nonprofit and charity, create a relationship with somebody creates that strong bond, will make them care about what it is that you do. I often talk about know, like, and trust factors, right? And building upon those will help you get brand ambassadors. It'll help you get volunteers. It'll help you get people that care about your organization, that might be willing to hit share on an article or a news release or something like that. And ultimately will help you get donations.
That's for sure. I mean, I think an easy way to an easy analogy I use in helping to explain what PR is versus advertising. So advertising, you as the brand are buying your way into the lives of your audiences. So it's like a movie. You can have a movie poster or an ad for a movie saying, this is the best movie of all time. You have to see this movie. But if your favorite movie reviewer or blogger or Instagrammer says, hey, this was an awesome movie, you should go see it, it has that added credibility. You've already trust that movie reviewer or that podcaster or whatever. And you're way more likely as that end audience to act upon their recommendation because you've already got that trusted relationship. So, 2 thumbs up really means something much more coming from somebody you trust versus from the brand itself.
100%. And I think that's why some of these platforms like Rotten Tomatoes or whatever, right? Where, you can go and you can kind of like crowdsource and go, okay, yeah, you know what? Like, a lot of people really like this. Maybe it's something that I should look at, right? And relying on some metrics like that can certainly help.
For sure.
So in terms of PR, a lot of people kind of think about content. So
Right.
what about content, right? Like, what does that mean to you?
So content, I think, is like really kind of, again, understanding what's important and what is a void that you can fill as a brand in your audience's life, and how can you serve their need for learning more about that. So You yourself as an organization can put out content. So it can be anything from a newsletter to a blog to your website to social media feeds. So you as a brand can publish that, but then you can also curate content. So you can, as an organization, curate the best of, best information about a given topic. So if I don't know, you're working for a health brand, then that disease state, you could curate information and be valuable and add value to your audience's lives in that way. So they don't have to themselves do all the legwork. You're going to do the legwork for them. You can collaborate on content. So identifying who or what other organization has a mutual interest in reaching that audience, or better yet, as a nonprofit, is there an organization that already is a part of my audience's lives, and working with them to create content, bringing both your strengths to the table. So that's just an example of types of content and how it might work.
I love that idea in terms of, collating and going out and finding other people's content that then you can push out to your audience and go, you know what? The first half of 2022, these are some of the breakthroughs that happened with, cancer research globally, right? These are things that we should be talking about and thinking about or having conversations around, and making sure that you're building authority by talking about things that aren't necessarily only your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the ideal mix has a little bit of everything. And so, yeah, I mean, we've been successful with our newsletters on well-being marketing. And so there's no one place, to my knowledge anyways, other than us, that curates different content about marketing in the well-being space. Certainly there's a lot of marketing going on of well-being issues, but nobody looking at it from a marketing standpoint and putting those pieces together. So I think that's, we add value in that way. So it's very much curated content. So here's what this brand is doing and how they've chosen to relate their brand to well-being, and providing our slant on it. But that's the content we're putting out. It's not the original pieces of work. So people are looking to simplify their lives. And if you can do that as an organization and not reinvent the wheel, but just kind of make the wheel a bit better, then that's really useful, I think.
For sure. So you mentioned well-being marketing. What is well-being marketing?
So it's kind of not a catch-all, but I guess an umbrella for brands and how they impact people's well-being. I think any brand now, consumer research shows that people expect any brand, even an insurance or financial services brand, to address well-being in some way. So even though that may not be kind of their core line of business, it's got to be part of their business in order to pass muster with consumers. So that's, well-being marketing is, okay, how are you as a brand going to embrace well-being in some way to meet those demands of what people want today, especially in light of COVID? Well-being is top of mind. And so, yeah, that's what it's about.
And to that point, COVID brought around a lot of things, like the way that we think about work, for example, working from home instead of in an office, right? I know you have a virtual agency. I have a virtual agency where we're maybe a little bit outliers pre-COVID in terms of that, but well-being is a big part of it. There's the Great Resignation piece that's kind of like getting lots of media play about people leaving their jobs because they'd rather be working from home. They feel that they can contribute more instead of going into an office, and they save cost on travel and that, but also their time, right? Mm-hmm. And making sure that you're staying on top of the well-being as a business or as a nonprofit or a charity, right? It will really resonate with the audience that you really need to think about connecting with to help cultivate into ultimately being a donor.
100%. I think it comes back down to, okay, whether it's employees or donors or even the people, who your nonprofit benefits, what do they want? What's important to them? And then acting in that way. I mean, many people when COVID first hit were asking me about, oh, you've run a virtual company for so long. What are some of the things Can you share your secrets and your tips? And ultimately, I mean, there's no technology. Like, I wish there was a silver bullet, but there really isn't. There's that unique recipe that works for each company based on what's important to their organization and what's important to their organization's audiences. And so really, I think it comes down to listening to what your people want and then addressing it.
To that point, you need to talk to them, right? You need to find out what is it that they want. You can you can sit and have all kinds of strategy meetings up the wazoo, trying to go, okay, this is what we believe our audience cares. But until you actually go and validate that information, go, you know what, this actually rings true, or
Yeah.
holy cow, I can't believe that we thought this. This is like the exact opposite of it, right? And I think there's a lot that can come from stakeholder engagement meetings and involving the community that believes in your cause and is with you to that end.
Yeah. We actually call that inreach. Like it was a term we coined because I think traditionally marketers and communicators and fundraisers even think of we have to do outreach. So we have to think of what message we want to get out, and then we have to go out and get that message to them. And I think that if you flip it over, I think it would apply very well in a nonprofit setting when you're trying to raise funds and raise support otherwise. I think if you start off, you can bring some key stakeholders into those planning meetings, or and have them be a part of setting out what you're going to do. And I prefer the term engagement rather than outreach, because it really speaks to that kind of two-way street. So it shouldn't be developing the message in the boardroom and then going out with it when we're ready to launch. It should be kind of an iterative process, and involving key stakeholders as early in the process as possible, in that form of inreach. I think will make you all that much more successful. You
Having
don't have to
said
have all
that,
the
having said that, you do need somebody to steer the ship. You need somebody to have the will and
Mm,
the guts to
mhm.
stand up and go, you know what? We need to do this in reach. We need to do engagement instead of just pushing that. And it needs to come from really the top down. It needs to be a collaborative approach that everybody buys into.
Yeah, and the most successful, processes that we have run is when that top is part of the meeting, because it can be very eye-opening. I think it's again, in a more traditional sense, people are scared of opening the tent flaps, right? As it can be disarming when you're used to planning everything. But listening, I think, is one of the most compelling forms of communication, and that's really where that comes to play. And everybody's eyes are open, and the ultimate product is way more successful as a result.
100%. And when we're talking about marketing and PR and content, like how do those kind of like all play? And I hate to use the word synergy because it's like way overused, but like how do they all kind of culminate in an awesome experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no solid line between all the pieces of the marketing mix anymore. It's very hard to kind of distinguish where one piece like marketing begins and PR ends, or whatever. It doesn't work that way from my experience anymore, because a big part of marketing is social media, let's say, or digital. And big part of digital is not just putting stuff out there, but it's getting stuff in, right? So getting people to come to you. And so I think it's all interconnected. So I think that everybody has to work hand in hand and just figure out who's going to do what kind of behind the scenes within your organization, really. But I think that everything has to work together, because there's no solid line between kind of us and them anymore. And even with internal to the organization and external to the organization, like we just talked about.
And I think that's very true, right? And when we talk about that, we think about, being partners, right? And collaborative and working together. And there's other types of partnerships as well. There's like strategic partnerships and alliances that you can have. How did those type of partnerships play a role in PR and marketing and content?
Yeah, I think from a PR perspective, I've worked on many partnerships in my career, and ultimately you're looking for the the whole to be greater than the sum of its parts. So not just putting two pieces of a puzzle together, but when you put those 2 plus 2 equals 5. So what do you bring to the table that will complement the other party's abilities and strengths? One of the partnerships we engaged in when I was working at Coke many years ago was in the lead up to the Olympics. Coke was obviously a global sponsor of the Olympics, very like synonymous with it. We had access to a whole bunch of spots on the torch relay, but we were facing a lot of criticism, and that was actually my job, to figure out what to do with all the criticism Coke was facing with regard to the obesity debate. And Coke, what does Coke know? Coke knows how to market and how to engage and excite young people, especially. And we had also a sedentary crisis in Canada, so kids and youth who were not active. And so in the lead up to the Olympics, we said, okay, what can we do to actually use our sponsorship as a force for good? And so we partnered with Participation, whose objective is to get youth active. And so we worked with them to develop a program that would encourage youth to get active. And the ultimate prize they could win was a spot to carry the Olympic torch relay leading up to the Vancouver Olympics. And so I think that's an example of, Participation. They're not marketers at heart. They had marketers, but like ultimately they don't have the kind of the amplification that Coke would. And so those two partners kind of worked synergistically to kind of achieve their own objectives, but ultimately to achieve a greater good together.
I think that's an awesome example of how you can leverage a partnership to help tell the story, solve a problem, and get out there and start creating some dialogue around whatever it is that you want to focus on.
Mm-hmm. And it's, you have to kind of look for, in my opinion, ideally you look for things that it might not be the obvious at first. It might not be the thing that comes to mind, and there might be a little bit of an edge to it. Like the Participation and Coke one, we were certainly faced with a lot of criticism or a lot of questions, I could say, in the face of announcing that partnership. But, Unlikely Bedfellows actually makes it interesting to people. And that in itself can get you more awareness than you would if you kind of flew a little bit under the radar and were a little bit safe with who you're engaging with. So I would encourage any of your audience to think outside the traditional and safe box, because those unlikely bedfellows can actually be very powerful.
100%. But also everybody should understand there's a little bit of nuance in terms of getting buy-in from, the higher ups. Like they want to probably stay a little bit safe because that's the comfort zone. Yeah. And there is a lot of truth to try to push the boundary a little bit or push that edge a little bit, right? Where you're like creating a little bit of buzz around what it is that's happening, so that you can get some more attention on the cause that you're trying to help.
Yeah, or just doing something different. Like I feel like it's very hard to stand out, and there's so much vying for our attention. There's so much vying for our money. And so I think that doing it smart and being willing to take a calculated risk can definitely bode well for both the attention and the fundraising aspect.
For sure. And while we're kind of talking about content a little bit earlier, when we talk about content, there's content, and then you could have something like custom content. What are some benefits of PR or custom content that nonprofits or charities could take advantage of?
Sure. I would kind of define custom content as something that is relevant and useful and that makes sense for your brand to be delivering to your audience, but doesn't necessarily have to do with the product you're selling or directly related to the ask for funds. What it is, it's relationship building and adding value in your audience's life. So whether that's creating an editorial, like a magazine or a newsletter that profiles people who have benefited from the charity's efforts, that human interest angle. So it's like basically not self-serving and not an advertisement, but is actually interesting information that your audience will want to read and want to engage in. And that will kind of strengthen their allegiance to you such that when it is time to make that ask, they're more inclined to do so because they remember, the story of that patient that benefited from the research, or top 5 trends or tips for disease prevention or something like that. So stuff that's kind of tangential but related and makes sense coming from your brand, but isn't, making that direct ask.
And that's something I probably mentioned on probably 5 or 6 episodes, is you need to provide additional value in the content that you're publishing and not just be out there asking for money all the time. Yes, as a nonprofit and charity, you need donations, you need money to run the business, to do the work that you need to do. If you're a homeless shelter, right? You have cleaning supplies that you need toilet paper in the bathrooms, you need light bulbs, you need food, right? There's all kinds of stuff that you need money to actually run, but being out there and creating some content around what it is that you do, the people that you help, and creating those stories, creating memorable things that you can hook people in with and stay top of mind over time is going to help you in the long run better.
Yeah. It's like building a foundation of trust, basically, and predisposing people to think of you and spend on you versus the other multitude of things vying for that pocket.
Awesome. So let's switch gears for a few minutes here. All right. So PR, right? You've been doing this for a really long time. What are maybe three misconceptions or questions that you often get about what it is that you do?
Sure. I think the first one is, I mean, the first question that we usually get when people come to us is they say, "Can you write me a press release?" And especially nowadays, there's so many ways to reach your audience. And people really think like if you write a press release, you will get press coverage. And it doesn't work that way at all. So the press release is really kind of the vehicle or the tool for getting your news or your information out. But that's just a tip of the iceberg because what it really takes is the relationships and knowing who to contact. And when you contact them, that they'll kind of pick up the phone or they'll read you, open your email or your message. So that's like a way bigger part of PR is making sure you know who your target audience is and having relationships with those people. So like relationships with editors and influencers and things like that. The press release is almost secondary. I mean, some organizations have to have it for reporting purposes and things like that. They're publicly traded and such, but for the most part, it's about who you know and what you know and targeting appropriately. So I think that's the first misconception. Like a press release can be all for naught unless you get it out there in the right way and know how to do that. I think the second misconception is about mass media. So we get another question we get is, oh, we want to get on the cover of the Globe and Mail, or how can you get us press coverage? And when we start working with a client, we start with a questionnaire to really have them fill us in on a 360-degree view of their business. What are they about? What are their existing experiences with communications and relationships that they have built? What's worked in the past? What hasn't worked in the past? And a lot of times we'll start digging and we'll realize, well, what, maybe we can get them in the Globe and Mail or a cover story and whatever. But really, these guys have a mailing list that people have opted in and they're not communicating to these people at all. So that's way lower hanging fruit, and you kind of do the ROI calculation and you say, you know what, hey, this is what it would cost for like a mass media relations campaign and to build out a whole media engagement program. But let's just try building a program where we directly reach to the people who have said you can reach back out to me. And if we get 10% of those people acting on our message, you'll far exceed the potential ROI of other things. So I guess that mass media is that next one. It's mass media is not necessarily the best medium. It's very good in many circumstances, but it's not the be all and end all. And then I think the last one is all PR is good PR. So, I hear that saying a lot and it's not always true. You don't want, there's crises to be managed and there's certain things, you don't like when we were talking about risk taking. Some risks are worth taking and you can calculate the risks on many things, but some risks aren't. And so I think that's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, and one thing when you're talking about mass media that came to mind is like people don't know what they don't know, right? They might think, you know what, yeah, we need to get this kind of coverage, but bringing in an expert like Amy and her team at Felicity PR, that's really going to open up your client's eyes in terms of, yeah, there's like all these other options that are out there and maybe this is a better approach, and let's dig into that and let's analyze that and see, where that road may go.
Yeah, sorry, to add to that, I think, we do a lot of influencer relations. So that's where instead of going to mass media, like newspapers, TV, websites, like different web outlets, social media influencers is a really big thing. And that can be very, very targeted and it's very measurable. So it's basic and you can get down to a micro level. So we did a campaign for a company that had developed an app for MS patients. And that's a very targeted audience. So they wanted to reach these MS patients to help encourage them to download and use their app. And so, yeah, we could have gone and maybe got them some sort of article in a mass media, but the likelihood of those people with MS, seeing or being forwarded that cover page story was relatively small compared to reaching out and identifying who are people with MS looking to for advice, for inspiration. And we worked with those like very small handful of influencers. And this app was launched globally. And Canada was far beyond any of the other countries that launched this app in terms of its uptake. And that's even accounting for the fact that unfortunately Canada has like the highest incidence of MS in the world. But really, they were shocked. And it was because we took a very, very targeted approach and we didn't advertise our way into the lives of these people with MS. We relied upon people they already trusted to work with them to share information and encourage them to download and use the app.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for a very targeted, direct, and strategic approach to the effort. If you're going to put in time and especially money to help bring your organization to the forefront around whatever that topic happens to be, make sure that you're doing it in a really concerted effort. Absolutely.
Yeah, it
And
doesn't have to be you going to say it, right? It's you having that relationship with the people who are already, like how social media works is, as a company or as a nonprofit, you can try to buy your way into people's feeds, but it's far more effective if more organically they're already scrolling through and they love and they always click on, the reels of a certain person. Well, that person's reel so happens to be about your campaign. It's far more effective that way in terms of making sure people actually see and act upon your call to action.
100%. If you can build your rapport and get out there to your audience without having to build your own list, why would you spend the time and effort to build your own list when you can I'm going to use that term a little bit loosely, but like work with somebody and create that relationship with them where they care about your stuff and they can push it out to their audience, especially if what you're talking about resonates with them. If they experienced homelessness in their childhood, or one of their parents or siblings or cousin or somebody they know, best friend or whatever, reach out to them because there's already an emotional connection with that idea and that topic, right? And I think that using that kind of approach would be very valuable for probably everybody listening to this.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So hiring, right? Somebody wants to hire a PR agency or communications consultant. What should they look for?
I think that they should look for it. Again, it comes down, I think, to relationships. So how is that relationship that they have struck and how do you feel in your relationship with them? And then do they have relationships with the people, or would they know how to access your audiences? So, on our team, we have mostly senior people. That's where the whole brains not bricks comes from. And so these are people who have 20-year-long relationships with the key editors and different influencers. And they really know the lay of the land almost intuitively. And if they don't, right away know, they know how to go about getting it. So I think that's really kind of the one thing that I would look for is, does the agency or the consultant you're looking to hire have the expertise and those relationships in the areas you're looking for? And then the other thing I would look at is cost. So people structure their businesses in different ways. So when you're kind of going to look for a PR partner, I would just look at how are you going to measure ROI? Are there specific metrics that are going to be in place, and what are those going to be? And then how are you going to be charged for it? So the traditional way in PR is billable hours, just like a law firm, basically. So this is how much time I've spent, and therefore I'm going to charge you this amount. And it's not the industry norm, but when I started my business, I thought I wanted to charge based on output, not input. So rather than charging for the amount of time spent, which incentivizes you to spend more time, I charge for what are you buying here? So whether it's like a 2-page press release with 3 rounds of edits, or whether it's influencer relations and influencer partnerships with 8 to 10 influencers in your space. So that's the deliverables based on which our contracts are built. And so it works well for us. It's, again, certainly not the norm. I would say this industry standard is still billable hours. And across many industries, it makes sense for those people. But I know that our clients at least really value this idea that they know what they're getting when they sign on to work with us. And from our perspective, we don't stop until that's done, versus I've had experience with other agencies in the past where, they say, okay, yeah, we're done our hours. And you're like, but you didn't get the results that we were going to get. They're like, yeah, well, we're done our hours. So we don't have to have those conversations in our business anyways at Felicity.
Amazing to hear you talk about this in that kind of way, because it's really about providing value to your clients, and it's a different way of thinking. And you don't need to settle for paying $100 an hour, $200 an hour, $300 an hour when you're not necessarily going to get out of it what was promised without going over budget, over time, and working it that way. And that's a really great approach.
You have to be comfortable. So you have to know, like, I don't know what you're getting, right? Buyer beware. For me, anyways, when I was a client, and then back when I worked in another couple of big agencies, the standard was billable hours. And so when I started with a blank slate, starting Felicity, I was like, you know what? I think a better way to quantify what we're doing for clients is what we're doing for clients as opposed to the time. It's certainly harder to scope out and to say, here's clearly defined, here's where the work starts and here's where it stops. But we've ironed out most of those kinks by now, 10 or 11 years into business. And so we're pretty good at that now. And the client feedback's been very positive. So yeah.
That's great, right? You need to know that what you're doing works, and that allows you, obviously you've refined what you do over time, but it allows you to bring this new approach and this new style, this new way of providing really solid value for your clients to the table, where you can deliver time and time again. And that's fantastic.
Time again.
Awesome. Amy, I've known you for almost my entire life, right? Like, we've known each other since preschool, right? And it's always great talking with you. There's been amazing insights around content, leveraging your brand, using PR to drive organizations forward with their mission. I hope that everybody listening has been able to get at least one or two really great thoughts that are here to help them drive their missions forward. And I challenge everybody listening to this or watching this, if you're catching this on YouTube, take one insight, just one insight, start working on it, talking about it today, and you'll reap the benefits moving forward down the road. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, Amy, what do they need to do?
They can drop me an email at amy@felicitypr.com, or just go onto our website, which is felicitypr.com. So FELICITYPR.com. And it's a wow digital website. So yeah. You can enjoy perusing while
I appreciate the plug. Thanks, Amy. Thanks so much for joining in, Amy. It's been great having you here on the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast. To everybody listening, if you want the links that Amy just provided, head over to our podcast page at nonprofitdigitalsuccess.com/podcast. Click on this episode for all the details. And until next time, keep on being successful.